Pred and Kenny were the standouts for me. I thought Kenny massively overperformed.
I think jumping on the coattails of what you just said, I think the Draza confidence factor is massive.
Every single team outside of the top 4 is horrible. They're all terrible.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Reverse Sweep presented by PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code Reverse Sweep for a first deposit match of up to $100. We've had an unbelievable weekend of Call of Duty at Major 2 in Miami, with FaZe being crowned our champions. I'm joined today by Pat and Doug. Unfortunately, Chris had some technical difficulties, so is having to sit this one out. But before we get into the finals, what did you guys think of the Call of Duty this weekend? For me, I thought it was probably better than the last event in terms of the quality of competition. I think everyone's really stepped up a notch. I mean, NYSL, the ratty stuff that they were coming out with, I think was testament to that. So for me, I really enjoyed this weekend's matches, especially watching from home. I could watch a lot more. What were your guys' thoughts on it?
I thought it was great. You know, the issue with last major was like New York got upset, and so we kind of missed out on some of those top 4 battles. But, you know, finally all the top 4 teams played as expected. And I would even argue we got some, like, bright moments from some of the teams outside of the top 4. Carolina stepped it up, and that was at least made it interesting, especially for how bad they looked online. But I think this weekend we saw a FaZe we haven't seen in a very long time, and those guys looked dominant. So I think overall we had a great weekend of Call of Duty, and I'm excited to break it down with you guys.
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to say, guys, I predicted a FaZe Optic final in our bracket prediction, and I said FaZe was going to win, but I got outvoted. Everyone said Toronto, but FaZe did end up winning. It was an amazing weekend for Call of Duty. We had a couple of Game 5 Round 11s, like the Carolina-Vegas game. That was awesome. FaZe was dominant. Simp is back in MVP form. We got a lot of drama happening, a lot of great matches happening. It just feels like Call of Duty is getting back to its roots, and it's really exciting because the competition was insane, and honestly, I had a blast. Even with challengers too, I had a blast with all Call of Duty this entire weekend.
Yeah. And the finals itself was an absolute gauntlet. I mean, every map for the most part was just down to the wire. And for me, I think that it was a real missed opportunity for Optic, to be honest. I think they had a bunch of chances there to close out on a bunch of those maps in the grand finals, but ultimately lose 4-1. And I think coming into this major, we all predicted unanimously, right, that FaZe were going to be the winners. But I think we, you know, a lot of teams and a lot of people online were kind of questioning that after FaZe's loss to LAG, and obviously Optic going undefeated on the online portion. But I think for the most part, FaZe looked unbelievable online. They had that blip against LAG, which was clearly one of those matches where they were just going in with the mindset of like, let's try different maps out. We're playing against, at that point in time, probably the weakest team in the league from the online portion. But ultimately they came in this weekend and just looked lights out from start to finish. And although Optic were close, it was ultimately FaZe who just continued to just clutch up when it mattered. And yeah, I really can't say anything higher of FaZe. What was your guys' thoughts on the final specifically?
I mean, dude, they were just shooting. I genuinely think you could make the argument that Optic played better Call of Duty than them in the final, but they just could not gun with FaZe. Like, that was the biggest difference maker for me. I mean, FaZe looked insanely confident. They were shooting bodies. Simp went on that 13 spree on Karachi where it literally, like, he was just ego challenging, like he was playing rank play. I thought that was the big difference maker for me, is just the level of confidence that FaZe was playing at. And we heard it too in their post-game interview, right when they won. So that to me, that form of FaZe is scary. And I was talking about it with you guys a couple episodes ago. Like, that's the FaZe I want to see. I want to see them delusional, confident, shooting bodies, walking around in the venue like they're the best team there. And you know, whether they listen to that or not, I think we got a glimpse of it, and it's a scary sight. Other than that, I mean, I do want to mention, too, that there was some disappointments. I don't know about you guys, but, like, I was disappointed by Ultra this weekend, too. Like, I thought they should have been in this final. Doug, you were talking about your prediction. I genuinely feel like every series they played, they had one person just not show up. Envoy had, like, one of the worst weekends he's ever had, and I was hoping FaZe was going to we'd get that rematch for Major 1, but we didn't, and FaZe took care of business, so.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, talking with Envoy, it seems like his controller was malfunctioning and he had some controller issues because, yeah, that's definitely uncharacteristic of Dylan. And if you have a player on your team that's playing as bad as he played, it's definitely going to affect the entire psyche. If he feels that his controller isn't working and he's playing the way he's playing, the entire team is going to feel compromised. We know this, Pat. I mean, we could go back from 10 years ago when you got the stitches in your thumb and you didn't show up in the first series. We're looking at you on the next map. Like, if you don't play good on this next map, we know we're losing. And then, you know, like, you showed up. But for these guys at this level with the competition as high as it is, you can't have a lapse of judgment. You can't be off for a second. And for them to even still place in the top 4 was great, considering that his controller was malfunctioning. I think that's the way Toronto's going to be looking at it. And in terms of FaZe, I think Draza's confidence is absolutely getting through to the psyche of this team, because for the longest time, I have been questioning not Cellium's talent, not his gameplay in terms of his individual mechanics and how he maneuvers around the map, but how he's always positive 30 for the loss, positive 15 for the loss. He went negative in the finals, albeit he had a .98, but he went negative, and Simp played the way that we expect Simp to play. It's been a long time since we've seen this from Simp. I've been calling him the future GOAT for a while. And then I think ever since I started calling him that, he started to slowly just not let me down, but not play to that standard that we expect from Simp. And when they're playing as good as they are, like you said, Pat, with dynasties, you've been a part of one of these dynasties, Pat. I think you were the guy on the team that not only put the team together, but also instilled the confidence in the team. If you had to play against a dynasty like this FaZe team with this confidence as high as they are, with Cellium playing, winning Call of Duty at the highest level, also with his mechanics, with Simp playing in an MVP form, we're not even talking about aBeZy here. It's going to be really difficult. We were saying in this last major about Toronto, it's going to be difficult to stop Toronto, but we know what we're going to get from this FaZe roster. And if they're going to consistently play this well in the finals, I don't know how our team is going to stop them. It is going to be really difficult to beat this team.
Yeah. I think jumping on the coattails of what you just said, I think the Draza confidence factor is massive, because even at like the end there when they were lifting up the trophy, the fans were all chanting MVP when Simp's lifting it up. You've got Draza who's joining with the fans and chanting MVP. You can tell he's like a player, just from what I've seen over the last couple of years, that really elevates the level of confidence within his team. And that was shown at LAT and now here in FaZe. And I think overall he's just a great piece for them, and that's probably what they needed. And I think overall, just to jump back on the Simp bandwagon, I think the 150 HP Simp is different. Him on Cold War, him on this game. I think like when you've got that hat. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, did you see the stat? I saw someone post on Reddit. In 150 HP CODs, Simp and aBeZy are 11-0 against Shotzzy.
Oh, you love that stat, don't you?
You love that, Pat?
That's the 150 HP CODs, Cold War and MW3. That's a crazy stat, though. 11-0? No, like, that's 100%. The Shotzzy slasher thing. It's like slashers never beat Shotzzy.
That's mad. No, but I do think it's a factor, though, when it comes down to these, like, it's the same as Kleenex as well, like, although ultimately didn't have a great event this weekend, so it's not the best time to talk about it. I think when you have these players with like this incredible amount of individual talent, when you have a higher like TTK or lower TTK, should I say, then you're going to have more opportunities to go off, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for Simp, really, is he's able to just make plays and without just getting one shot by someone holding a pre-aim, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I was going to say on the flip side, what did you guys think about Optic? Because I was impressed with how they played, but I still have fears that their slaying is just not up to par on LAN. Like, they even had series where, like that winter final, I think they got massively outslayed in majority of maps and still kept it close. And they even had one series where they were getting outslayed and won. I don't know where their slaying went, and for me, looking at their online versus LAN, like they slay online. I don't know, like they get their kills and they look dominant. They set records basically. Dashy, I thought, had a really bad event. I thought Shotzzy had a pretty lackluster event. Pred and Kenny were the standouts for me. I thought Kenny massively overperformed, especially in the finals. He was like the only one shooting back against FaZe. But I don't know if you guys thought that. I mean, obviously they still played very close, and that kind of references what I mentioned in the beginning, where it's like they were playing pretty good fundamental Call of Duty, but they just were not slaying at all. I'm wondering what you guys think was the cause of that.
I think one of the factors being like teams are not letting them get Rio as well. I think like you always seen a lot of those big performance shots on Rio on Hardpoint this weekend. I'm just looking through the stats now. I can't remember did they even play it all weekend? I can't remember them playing it.
We thought they were going to get against Miami, and they didn't get it in.
Yeah,
Miami plays it a lot. So, yeah, they got perma vetoed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I know obviously that's not the biggest factor. I think overall, like they, especially in the top 6 matches, I mean, it is a good sign if they can hang to the point. They're obviously playing better Call of Duty, because at some points in Optic's history, we would have been like, oh, they're just getting loads of kills and they're not actually playing good COD. But now I think they're on the flip almost, where if they were able to pick up a couple more kills, like, I mean, yeah, if you look at some of these KDs and some of these series they've had, meanwhile, they're being like a couple kills away from winning the map. Yeah, I mean, if they could pick up a couple more kills, they definitely would have been able to turn some of these results around for sure.
I would say, like, Pat, I think you're extremely hard on Optic. I think, obviously, we know Dashy always can put up a 1.2, and he's constantly, obviously, he's changing his play style, and it's very apparent. I mean, I've never seen Dashy put up a 0.78 in, like, I can't remember the last time I've seen it, but he still put up 18,000 damage in the finals. And there's two things I want to say here. One, I think Atlanta FaZe just played some of the best Call of Duty that we're going to see this entire year. And it doesn't matter who's on the other side. It doesn't matter, Pat. Like, you know, when you're dominant, it doesn't truly matter who you're shooting against. We saw what we saw with FaZe. They looked dominant. There is no weakness in the team. We have no questions in how they mesh with each other. We have no questions in how they bounce off of each other in terms of their dynamic and their play styles. They've been playing together their whole careers. They know everything about each other. This Optic team is a new team still, albeit they've only been teaming for 5 months, and we are halfway through the season. It is a new roster. Dashy is changing his play style. I think Pred had probably one of his worst series we've seen from him in his career. And with that being said, their 2 LAN results are 3rd and 2nd. And again, if you're losing to the most dominant roster in Call of Duty midway through the season, if I'm a coach for Optic Gaming here, I'm just saying, okay, Pred, we know you got to step it up. You didn't have the best series in the finals. He knows that, and he's going to take accountability for it. And he's a great leader in that sense. Kenny played great. We all know what Kenny could do. I mean, he to me is the most proven player on this roster, just based off of his experience and his history and what he's done over the years. I think with Shotzzy, obviously Rio will handicap them if he's not playing that map. We're going to see a lot of spawn changes moving forward again. We're going to see a lot of map changes moving forward again. So it's going to be a new game again. So I wouldn't really take this and say Optic isn't good enough because online they went 7-0 and they're barely scraping by getting a lot of Rios. And then on LAN, you know, Dash is dropping a 0.78 and Pred's dropping a 0.84 and Shotzzy dropping a 0.89. I think that it's a few things. I think 1, FaZe is really good on a 150 HP game. 2, they had way more chemistry than Optic. And 3, the Optic Texas playstyle online is definitely slightly better than it is on LAN. But with that being said, I still think they're good enough to win a major, good enough to win a tournament. And if you're going to lose to Atlanta FaZe with the form they're in right now, with the maps being as close as they are, knowing that the game is going to update again, I would just have an optimistic approach moving forward because you're still in a great spot for the season.
And one thing I'd like to add on as well, that Optic have clearly been subscribed to their reverse sweep because they've really worked on their search and destroy. And you guys should subscribe to their reverse sweep too, because clearly it's doing something to Optic. They've watched us discuss it back and forth, and they've came in, and ultimately today they lost against New York, but they're looking good. And New York, again, a team that I think that we need to talk lots about because they have been doing some serious homework. The wall bangs, the nade spots, all of that was a really good sign. And that's clearly the extra work that's been done behind the scenes by like the coaching staff and all that sort of stuff. So I really like that of New York. And it was definitely completely new stuff. I was sending my team who were in challengers like clips throughout the weekend, like, yo, look at this, like all these different little spots that they were using to their advantage. And I think it's crazy to see that the amount of sort of stuff that wasn't aware, that a lot of teams weren't aware of going into this event. So New York.
Would you guys, I mean, I saw a lot of conversation about New York strategies, and I thought it was funny because, and this isn't to like put on the old head cap here, but like it was funny to me that like the reaction to, I think it's called Ordnance Gloves, which essentially for those that didn't play Call of Duty back in the day is strong arm. It was the strong arm perk. You just throw nades further or throw stuns further. Like I thought it was really cool that they did that and got nerdy with their strats, but I did think it was funny to me that like it seemed like it was like a never before seen thing. And I'm kind of confused. And this goes back to like a conversation we had on a few episodes ago. It's like, I feel like back in the day, players put more time into strats, like coming up with unique strats, like pre-stuns, pre-nades, using stuff like this, perk to achieve that. And I'm kind of surprised that New York is like the first team to do it. Like, obviously, credit to New York, but I'm wondering if we see more of that. Because I feel like at least in the last few years, we've seen pretty just like chaotic COD be played. Like it's just who's better gun to gun. And strategy kind of fell out of it. But I thought New York, used it in multiple scenarios where it worked out well. And I'm wondering if we're going to get more of that from more teams going forward, especially the bottom teams, right? Like anything to get an edge.
I have a theory. Can I say my theory?
Yeah.
My theory is this, man. I think once we move to a franchise league and players get a bi-weekly paycheck, they're playing more individually instead of more for their team. And then the second there's a friction, everyone starts focusing more on themselves instead of helping each other. Pat, I don't know if you and Mark, I don't know if you feel this way, but I always personally as a player always felt like I never really cared about my gameplay as much as people think that you should care about your own gameplay. It's more so about what's the most optimal way to play as a team to win and what you have to do in that moment and what's the bottom line, assembly line, rotations, positioning. Everyone needs to understand what everyone's doing at all times, because if somebody loses a gunfight in a spot of the map, how are we all reacting? Where are we all going? What are we all doing? Right? How are we going to stun check things? How are we going to use our grenades and our tacticals? How are we going to have efficient spacing on the map? What's the fastest way we're going to get to the objective and how? And do it as a team. I think that this new era of Call of Duty really benefited a team like Atlanta FaZe, and that's why they're so, I don't want to say it's why they're so dominant, because I also think it's because they're amazing, but when you're constantly playing these broken rosters, right? I've been a part of Boston Breach now for 2.5 years. I've seen how many changes we made. I've been a part of the academy system and watching our players go to the league. I see the way that it goes for us. I see the way it goes for all these other rosters. It's constantly people just looking out for themselves and always making sure that they're good first. So I do agree, Pat. I think back in the day when we weren't playing for these big salaries and we had to win to make money, the priority was who is the best? Okay, it's Aches and his team. Why are they the best? That study everything they do. So teams were able to grind a lot more together, whereas now teams only get 5 weeks, 7 weeks, maybe 10 weeks max together. It's not a lot of time is my point. So you're giving your team so much pressure to execute in a small amount of time. And I think because New York's been around for so long together with each other and they're extremely comfortable, they want to go over these bottom line end game goals, and teams should. There's no excuses for you to not to. If you're in the league and you're not on the best team in the game, you should absolutely be studying every little thing all these top teams are doing, how they do it, why they do it, and then see how you could break them down and then emulate it. Like, it's not about how good you are. That's the point that I'm trying to say. I don't care about your stats. I don't care where you come from. I don't care how good you are. Is your team good enough to compete and hang with these guys? And how do you make them feel uncomfortable on the map? And what do you have to do to make that happen? So, Pat, to your point with Ordnance gloves, it's hilarious to me how people are kind of shocked by it. It's a meta thing. Like, I saw Parasite talking before, and unfortunately he's not with us, but he was saying, oh, well, we have to maybe possibly GA Ordnance gloves on Karachi because Sky's got a 3-piece with it. Well, it's called a blind counter. And we've been seeing this since the beginning of time in Call of Duty. We have to predict what a blind counter is going to be on a map and a mode, depending on your psyche and depending on how you want to play the map. Maybe you guys want to triple nade this blind counter. Well, maybe we'll just blind counter and go A. Maybe we'll wait for the nade, then hit it. Well, if you threw these nades, you didn't hit anything. Now you don't have nades, right? So there's this mind game to Call of Duty that I feel we've lost over the CDL, and we prioritize individual talent. When that only gets you so far, maybe it'll get you to a top 4 placing. Maybe it'll get you to a top 3. By the time you're playing in the loser final, winner final, grand final, you're getting smoked every single time by a top team. And that's just what we've seen in Call of Duty history. And I still see it to this day.
Before you go, I saw some people talking about, like, should it get GA'd, the Ordnance gloves, because of that. And, like, with how I feel like the COD pros nowadays think, I'm afraid, like, it would be in the conversation because strategy, I feel like, is almost outlined as cheese. Now, it's like the same thing with smokes, right? Like, that's why smokes have been an issue. Do you guys think it kind of potentially could be? Because I hope it's not.
I hope it's not, personally. I mean, like, I think that higher level of strategy always, like, widens the gap and the skill gap and obviously allows teams to at the bottom end of the league as well to really go nerdy with it and start figuring out all these high level strategies that can also bridge the gap between the top teams. And to go back to Doug's point as well, I think that is a big thing, is that, like you said, a lot of these players are coming into like a 7-10 week period where that is their opportunity. And these teams are trying to figure it out, and they've got so many more things to figure out before they can even get to the point of going through like nades, because there's so little time and so much pressure to instantly perform in this league now that teams are so focused on all the other things first than like going through that. And these teams like New York, Ultra, these sort of rosters who have been together for years and sort of slowly changed, maybe slightly. What is my dog doing? They slightly changed their rosters. They've allowed themselves to basically go through and do all these more sweaty things. And I know for a fact that Flux from Toronto loves a nade. So he's going to be in private matches on Monday or Tuesday figuring out ordnance nades. So yeah, I think it's interesting. It will definitely make the league more, definitely more strategy heavy, because I think that's something that we're lacking right now in Search and Destroy. Especially maps like Rio, you're just seeing teams just 4-man hitting shit. And that's also a factor due to the high TTK as well, or the low TTK.
Speaking about things that are strategy heavy, I think we need to come up with some better strategies for our prize picks. Looking at our last entry, I feel like we got pretty close. Sib definitely let us down here. But yeah, Kleenex obviously had more, Tatch less, Sib less, Shotzi less, Celium more, and Afro more. So 3 out of 6 on our flex.
Well, we did. I mean, looking at the games, like we did say that the Shotzi one would be tricky because they could just absolutely destroy Miami Heretics, and that's exactly what happened. I don't know what happened in the Sib situation. Obviously, that's a bit of a stinker, but
they just played terrible against Boston to start.
I think Attach is the biggest surprise for us here, like realistically, out of the 3, because I think that coming into this LAN, he was one of the top performers in the online stage, and obviously they were playing against Ultra, but he had been doing it week in, week out against whatever opposition he'd been playing, obviously regardless of win or loss. So for me, I think that the Attach one was the biggest surprise, and he was close.
And he also, I mean, this was like his only bad series on the weekend. Yeah. He fried in the next 2. I agree with you. I think this one was the one that I expected, Attached to go more. But yeah, it was unfortunate. All good. We'll be back. Luckily, Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make these picks and submit them in less than 60 seconds. And, next, we got a 2-week break, but when we come back, we'll have Major 3 qualifiers start. So this is Friday, April 12th. We got Atlanta FaZe going up against the Minnesota Rocker and the LA Gorillas against a Vegas Legion. Those are the 2 matches on that Friday. Anything that stands out to you guys in that one?
Ooh. I could we see some roster changes out of Minnesota?
I think so. I think so.
I don't think we touch any of Minnesota personally. I think that we focus on FaZe and them coming back in after a hot event win. I think they're going to look to continue their dominant streak. I think they had so many years of, being so close and obviously still being the most consistent team in the CDL. They've got this bit of success again. I think they're going to push for more and more. So for me, I think they're going to start off hot in this next stage. So I would like to say, FaZe, somewhat, anyone. Who cares? Just pick someone in FaZe.
Simp, he's looking insane.
Yeah, but he might put his feet up this time. He had his.
You think he's putting his feet up?
he might put his feet up for this one. Nah, but the point I just made is they're all going to go hard. So yeah, I think Simp's in with a good shout because, he's the MVP. Just dropped 111 kills in 5 maps, which I believe is the record in the 5-map series.
Yeah.
His the
damage record too.
Gonna be
unreal.
His projection's gonna be crazy.
I would take a Celium less simply because of him going negative in the finals and Simp just doing whatever he wants. If Simp's going to start hitting form like this, you might have to take a Simp more for the rest of the season. What we're witnessing from this man right now could potentially be the greatest Call of Duty player to ever play when he's all said and done. This guy has absolutely no flaws to his game.
Yeah, he's absolutely in form. The fear I have in this series is it could be a quick one. We gotta assume Rocker make a roster change, right? Like we have to. I feel like we have to assume that
they are 5th right now, Pat, in the standings out of the 12 teams. But
they look so bad. They look so bad. Awakening had like one of the worst tournaments I've ever seen.
So who do you replace Awakening with, Pat?
I don't know what they'll do. I imagine they'll jump into challengers for an AR
Pierce,
player.
gunless.
Him, Dylan Rex, someone on FaZe Black. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, I think, assuming there is a roster change, I think if there's a roster change, they're going to pick up someone slay heavy on an AR, which means I'm thinking Lamar gets worse, and so I'm thinking Lamar less.
Okay. Well, they're gonna get somebody to replace Awakening to get kills, and I think it could be someone like a gunless.
Affects Lamar getting kills.
I understand.
Then we go Lamar less.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with
so
that.
Simp more, Lamar less.
Yep, I'm with it.
Alrighty. And then we have LA Gorillas against the Vegas Legion. I mean, dude, this one makes no sense because Legion, from what I saw, cannot clutch in any S&D, and LAG looks like a completely different team online and on LAN.
This is tough. LAG could come in and just be absolutely terrible again, and Vegas could 3-0 them.
Yeah.
And then Vegas could continue the trend from the major and just choke every single crucial moment.
I will say, if we're talking Vegas playing against a not top 4 team, I feel like Attach has to be a lock, though. Like, the only time I've seen him play bad in the last 8 games he's played or series was that one against Ultra. That was the only bad series he had.
Yeah.
What about a Nero more? I feel like Nero could start feasting against a team like this.
I don't hate that.
I don't hate that at all. Either. Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that or Attach, because I think that, like you said, Attach has been consistent, but Nero, I mean,
their projection is usually around the same.
Yeah. I'm trying to think though, if LAG quite likes the AR heavy maps, they'll probably veto Rio.
We doubled down on an Assault more. That worked for us a couple weeks ago.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. What, Assault more and Nero more?
Yeah, I mean, Assault, I feel like if he doesn't get dropped, I feel like he's playing in that kind of realm where if he doesn't start improving, and I feel like he's been on an upward trajectory, but if he doesn't start playing much better consistently, his spot could be up for grabs. And so I feel like he's got to be going hard.
Yeah.
Doug, you opposed to that?
I would agree with you. I think that's a good take.
All right.
I think before we continue, the one thing I would say is we could go Assault and he could get dropped by this point, so this could be a risky one. I mean, we don't know. I don't know if they're going to make a roster change after the top 6. Whereas going with an Attach more, I feel like is a safer than just that and leaving it at that, or maybe.
Oh, you're saying only go with 3.
Just don't even, or maybe just don't even include LAG and just do Nero and Attach, or maybe
we can't do the same team. We have to pick one player.
Oh, okay, all right.
So yeah, I'm okay with 3. I agree with you. I think LAG is the question mark. We could be, that's risky. But if we had to decide between Nero and Attach. Yeah, but they're horrible online. They were 1-6 or 0-6 and then beat FaZe randomly, and then that team
I don't have
no
confidence
sense.
in the Los Angeles Guerrillas online going against the Las Vegas Legion. I just really think a Nero more makes a lot of sense, and I don't really know what to expect out of Los Angeles Guerrillas. Maybe a Diamond Con more, maybe an Assault less.
Even that's risky because I feel like he's been inconsistent too.
It's just hard. Their whole team, honestly, has always shown me inconsistency.
What about Ezreal? If we're thinking
I would do it more for Ezreal.
Like a Grueler series?
Yeah, I would definitely feel more cool with doing Ezreal over Assault or Diamond Con.
Okay, so we'll lock in Simp more, Lamar less, Ezreal more, and Nero more?
Yes.
Yep. I'm done with that.
Alrighty. We'll lock that in when the CDL is back for Major 3 qualifiers. As always, PrizePicks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types, and that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use code REVERSESWEEP for a first deposit match up to $100.
A team we spoke a lot about previously, but I kind of want to go more in depth into them and really try and get your guys' opinions really on where you think Toronto are at right now. I think we obviously spoke coming into this event with their woes in terms of their map pool and S&D, with the maps changing, going into Major 2, etc. I think S&D was clearly their biggest downfall this weekend, and over the entire stage, to be honest. So think that's going to need to be the main game mode they focus on. It's hard to improve in S&D sometimes in the Pro League as well, because like you're just playing against teams that are just, you're scrimming and they're just trying the same strategy over and over and over and over again. But I think it's important they just try and get as many reps as possible. If we see some of these new maps coming in as well, that could be a factor. I'm not entirely sure if V-Star departures are being tested for search and destroy. I've not really looked into that too much. Do any of you guys know? Or
I saw Treyarch said they're putting in ranked. Yeah.
Okay. So just to your point, Mark, yes, I definitely think, look, I think this event for Toronto, if I'm on Toronto, I'm washing it up simply because Envoy does not make excuses. He clearly said he had controller issues. He clearly was the problem, and I have no problem saying that about him because we all know how amazing of a player Envoy can be. And we haven't seen something like this from him. So if I'm Toronto Ultra, I'm thinking just like I thought with Optic, the game is going to change. New maps are going to come in. Some maps are going to get taken out. And Envoy's controller was literally broken. So you can't win championships if you can't win Search and Destroy. Everybody knows this, but we all know how good the players on Toronto Ultra are at Search and Destroy. And yeah, like you said, Mark, just keep on grinding, get reps in, scrim challenger teams. I don't know why a lot of these pro teams, they just have these massive egos and they just think they're better than challengers. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I consistently watch a lot of pros going to challengers and get slammed. It's just a thing I've seen for years. Scrim these challenger teams in S&D. They're going to show you things that are going to make you rage. They're going to make you lose full. And ultimately, if you drop your ego, you're going to get better from it. And that's what's going to be the kryptonite when you play against one of these top teams in a big moment. Get those reps in. Keep doing what you got to do. And if I'm Toronto, I'm not really tripping about it. You're still number 2 in the standings.
I will say, I think the map pool will be interesting because I think it honestly will help them with the new maps coming in. But I did see Scrappy tweeting about like how he was like, you know what, fuck the GAs. Like, I think he felt that they got snaked or stair glitched or something. I'm not too sure, but it sounded like there may be a little GA debacle when we go back online because they didn't seem too happy about what was happening to them. I believe in the New York series. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. I don't think it really will change their team dynamic by any means, but they could get to the point where like they refuse to agree to GAs and teams start blacklisting them. Who knows? But I do think they will get better from the map pool kind of changing a bit, a little refresher for them because I think some of their worst maps are probably going to go. But yeah, I think aside from Envoy, Insight too was kind of a letdown for me this weekend. He played pretty lights out in Major 1. Obviously Scrappy was on MVP form, but Insight was rock solid in Major 1. He was like the backbone to that team. So for me, I want to see him kind of step it up as well because genuinely, I mean, even looking in series where Envoy played good, like Insight would be the guy who was playing bad. So yeah, they managed to get 4th, and I felt like they were literally playing 3v4 every map, whether it be just one person not showing up. So I don't think there's too much to worry about. I agree with you. They're 2nd, and I think they'll have a solid online stage. I'm just curious how fast these new maps are going to come in. Like, does the CDL pull the trigger on just swapping out? Because we've seen this in the past where there's a lot of debate because some teams want some maps out and others want others, and there's a lot of bias. And I'm wondering if CDL will just put their foot down and be like, all right, these maps are out. These are in. That's the end of it. Go scrim. But we'll have to see. But yeah, I think I'm confident on Major 3 for Toronto. I think they'll turn it around.
This is like a wider discussion. I didn't plan on talking about it, but I think the whole like GA map voting system is completely broken, to be honest. Like you just touched on there, Pat. You have teams in these situations voting on essentially what their worst map is. I can even remember back, and this has been going on for years as well. I remember on Cold War, right? Raid Hardpoint nearly got taken out of the map set by the pros. Raid Hardpoint, which was clearly, in my opinion, I mean, bias aside, our team were pretty good at the map. It was clearly not the worst map by any stretch of the imagination, and I think a lot of people did agree with that. But there was even a vote that nearly got pushed through of Raid Hardpoint coming out of the map set. So like that, for me, was the point where I realised like this whole system is just completely broken. I think we need like an independent I don't know how, but whether there's like a group of people, people that are involved in the scene and know the game at a high level, but aren't actually directly involved with teams making these decisions. Because, like you said, it's just based on whatever the team's worst map is.
It's way too much bias. Yeah,
I agree. It's a joke. They got to do something about that. Like, we all know from being a part of this community for a long time, it's a dog-eat-dog world. Everyone's always looking out for their own best interest, and the league should just put their foot down, honestly. Like, when we were coming up back then, we didn't really have as much say as the players do today. I don't understand why the players have all this power today. You guys are all prima donnas. You guys don't deserve half of the money you guys make. I'm just saying it straight up for what it is. You never deserved it, and you got to chill. Play the game, have fun, be the best player you can be for your team, be the best you can be because it's all you can do. You are not deserving of every blessing that's coming your way. You never were deserving of this stuff. Like, stop acting like you are the ultimate high-end hierarchy of everything. You should be absolutely grateful to be in the situation you're in today. So it just makes the game so much worse. And the reason I'm saying this, it sounds like I'm hating. I am, because I want to see our product do well. I want to see our product be better. I'm just sick and tired of it.
You're right. I'm hating.
I am, because it's just, I'm sick and tired of watching prima donnas act like they're making the product better when all they're trying to do is just better their bank accounts. Like, you haven't earned anything. If you haven't won something, don't talk like you've done something. Simply put to me, like, it's just that simple. And even if you have won something, don't act like you're just above everyone else as if someone else can't come up and win. I mean, just to go on a side note for a second, a player named 04 just won the Challenger event. He won a Game 5 Round 11 1v1 to win it. I retired playing this guy at Boston. I'm not trying to say anything about me being better than the guy or anything. I'm just trying to say he plays top 24 at Boston. A few months later, this guy's winning the Challenger event. He's probably going to get into the league. And the amount of bias and stigmas and randomness that I see, give these players opportunities to play the game. And even if you rise all the way to the top, there should absolutely be somebody in the league that has a authority, some sort of authority to just say, yo, you guys play the game, we make the rules and we run everything. We're the league, you're not. You're a player in this league. Be grateful that you're here. Make the most of your opportunity while you're here. And stop looking for all these petty ways out just to better yourself and your team and your bank account, man. It's just so selfish to me. And once one person does it, this is the problem. Once one person does it, everyone does it, right? We all know this. So you can't really just point the finger at one guy and be like, I hate you. It's the whole system of this thing, man. I want to see the league step in and do something about it. I couldn't agree more with you, Mark.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, overall, like the GAs as well, I just think there needs to be a better system. Point blank period. And hopefully that happens. Hopefully someone's listening. I think a lot of players agree as well. Like, I think it's getting to the point now where this is becoming more of a discussion. Like, what is this system that we're using? But anyway, I feel like we could talk about this all night. Let's get back to the Call of Duty action. And Guerrillas, they get another top 6 placement. And I mean, we were sitting here over the last couple of weeks, even after their FaZe result, saying, you know, are these teams really that good? I mean, top 6 isn't great by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's maybe a sign of the glaring issues within the league itself and the quality of competition. But Guerrillas, whatever they do, and I have my own theories on why they're performing better on LAN, but yeah, they're doing something right. Obviously, they've got back-to-back top 6, and you know, I've got some friends over there, so I'm happy for them. And obviously, they need to fix up online though, so that's the only way they're going to qualify for champs, is they're able to like actually start getting wins together online. What do you think they need to do better to get, you know, victories online? And what do you guys think they're doing better on LAN?
So they beat the Thieves and they beat Rocker, which was surprising. But I could argue they beat 2 teams who are also going to make roster changes now. But I have no idea why they're so inconsistent. You know, online, this team just looked horrible. Like, they couldn't win anything. And then they just randomly one day beat FaZe. And it's like, the hell is going on with this roster? I feel like, and I've talked about this before, there's just no one on this team that can play well every series. Like, I'm not even talking about like a star performance. Like, I don't expect someone to be like 1.2s. But like, literally, every series, these guys just take turns dropping like a 0.6 in a series. And when you have inconsistency issues like that, I feel like that's just kind of what's gonna happen to these results. Because when we talk about the league matches, you know, they're only playing 1 match a day, maybe 2 matches in a weekend, right? It's always very spaced out. But at a LAN event, like they're basically playing back to back, right? It's like very, very quick. You're playing matches within a 24-hour period, and they're important matches. And I feel like, you know, this team is just like they get where they're like they kind of get hot, right? And then they perform well for that stretch, and then they go back home and they could be the cold stretch and play very bad. They really need to figure out the consistency thing. I don't know where it starts, but I fear that there needs to be a roster change here, and I don't think it's going to come because I could really see this team go back online and be 0-6 again, and then randomly win one and start in losers, and then go to Major 3 and like upset two teams. So for me, I think it has to be a roster change. It just kind of like we've talked about this, like a refresher for the squad, because I don't feel like they can do anything in terms of preparation and practice to fix these issues. What do you think, Doug? I
agree 100%. I pulled up the standings for the league, and I'm just going to make this extremely clear cut. Atlanta FaZe is 19-4. Toronto Ultra is 17-5. Optic Texas is 17-7. New York Subliners is 15-6. Every other team is double negative in win-loss, almost triple negative in win-loss. And the only team that comes close to being somewhat even in terms of a win-loss percentage is Las Vegas Legion at 8-11. Every single team outside of the top four is horrible. They're all terrible. Whoever put these teams together, I don't know. To see these standings the way that this is pathetic, because there is a lot of talent on all of these teams from 5 to 12. And it's the way these dynamics are all put together. It just makes me think that we have a big bang coming. I don't think any of these teams outside of maybe Vegas Legion feel comfortable with their roster. I don't want to get ahead of myself right now. I know we're talking about Gorillas as well, getting better on land and doing well on land. I agree. Yes, they are better on land. They have players that have been proven on land as well. But I think every team needs a tweak. Every single team, maybe Vegas Legion. Again, they lost a Game 5 round 11 to Carolina. It was their first time playing together. I saw Attach smiling after they lost to Clay. It seems like he's the one who's running that team, and he seems pretty confident with their direction of where they're going. But you could just tell when you watch all of these teams play, they all just seem so broken inside. They just don't seem confident with themselves, with their team. They feel inferior to everyone else around them. There's just this huge disparity, and I don't even know where to begin, but there's probably going to be a big bang coming, because I'm just looking at these rosters and I just think, man, a lot of change-ups are about to happen.
No, 100%. And my theory about like Gorillas overall, and I do agree 100%, Doug, that I think changes are needed if they're wanting to get consistent online and potentially, push into being in that safe spot to qualify for champs. Because ultimately, LAG, I don't believe have ever qualified for champs. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure they've not. Maybe the first year because everyone did, but like in terms
of... Are we
like
playing to qualify for champs,
They haven't.
What are we playing for? Are we playing to win or are we playing to qualify, right? Like they could qualify as they are right now. They are they're seventh right now. They have a chance.
I mean, they're playing to win that shit, but they got to get there first. And I think ultimately they're in a position where if they were to squeeze top sixes, maybe one more event, but they still get shit online, they probably won't qualify for champs. It's just one of those ones where they need to like come in and maybe make a change up. But like my theory on why they're actually better on LAN, obviously number one being that they're not playing together in a facility type shit, but also on top of that, I think that they have a very like fundamental play style, and whenever we go into listenings with them, etc., I think their comms sound good. I think they've got those good intangibles within the team, but the biggest complaint we always have with this roster is just like the skill gap. They kind of get skill gapped by a lot of the top teams. So I think when it comes to LAN, when they're able to just kind of put those intangibles in place, they're able to get some wins against these weaker opposition teams like the bottom 8. But yeah, ultimately when they come up against Toronto for top 4, it's never going to be close. Whereas maybe some other teams give Toronto maybe a closer game. But in my opinion, it's just like one of those ones where Toronto just kind of go into that series knowing that they're going to win ultimately. But yeah, I mean, we'll go into the end of the show and discuss some potential roster changes, but you mentioned them there, Vegas. I think that coming in, we all had them unanimously and squeezing inside the top 6. They were looking like the 5th best team from the online stage, and then they come in and underperform ultimately. They had a lot of opportunities to squeeze into the top 6. They threw away a bunch of maps against Ultra in the first series. They could have quite easily won that series, to be honest. If Ultra were not playing great, they were down 100 to 180, I believe it was.
It was very close, yeah.
And it was 5-3 up on S&D, if I'm not wrong. And then it was like, again, close across the board. But for whatever reason, that one little decision is just always in that clutch moment. It's just wrong. And I'm not sure if that's like the leadership of the team, or I'm not sure if that's like the individual players just, blacking out and just making just a rogue play. What's your guys' thoughts on what's going wrong there in those tight moments?
So my opinion is like, it's really, this is like an unfixable problem. We've had players like this in the past, right? Where we talk about like gears, and I think players like Nero they play at one gear, and it's fast. It's just that's the gear they always play at, and they struggle with doing the easy play, right? They can do the hard play. They can get a crazy 2-piece, but when it comes to like a clutch moment where it's just like you basically have to do nothing to win the game, they can't comprehend that play style in the moment because it's not what they're used to. It's not what makes them good. And even though, I mean, I think Nero's like he could probably make a mistake, right? And right after he makes it, think to himself like, "Damn, that was a bad play. Like that play cost my team the game." But the difference is having that awareness in the moment and being able to avoid making that play. It was invasion. He got a kill. He set his team up to win the round, and then he just sprints out the door. It was rounded like it's just such a simple play that you never have to do, and his team wins that round 100% of the time. And then we had another one. I don't think it was round 11. It was on invasion again. It was a different team. Purge. I think he got the blood, and he just pushes up River Street and lays down, and it's like he could have backed up. He had attached looking over him, and he gets blooded, and it's like it's just these plays that I feel like aren't teachable. It's almost one of those things whether you have it or you don't, because it's in the moment decision making, and like you can practice that all you want, but if you don't have the capability to in that moment analyze the play, make the right play, the winning play, it's just that one gear. They don't have the ability to shift gears down and change that moment-to-moment gameplay decision. And so I think they're always going to struggle with that. I think that's also something that you have with Nero that you live and die by. He had it on his past teams. His upside is probably, I would say, outweighs that because his performances in Respawn. But like that's something you're just going to live and die by with him. But for me, I mean, I thought Purge had a really bad weekend. He turned it up in Major 2 qualifiers online. Like I will give him credit. He played much better. But then he came here, and I kind of just saw Major 1 Purge. You know what I mean? It's like I didn't see the improvement, and I feel like he regressed. And so I think this Vegas Legion squad has the ability to solidify themselves as 5th, 6th, but I think they have to get rid of their inconsistency, and that's going to be a roster change and picking up someone else for Purge. I just don't see the upside. I'm sure he brings a lot of intangibles to this team, but like Doug mentioned before, like, what are we playing for? And if we're just playing to like, oh, maybe we'll be the 8th seed, maybe we'll be the 7th seed, then why are you even in the league?
I agree.
If they want to really improve, like make the moves that will improve your squad as a whole and grind to be the best team you can be. I think a lot of teams are complacent, and I hope that changes. Major 2 to Major 3 is always the biggest, most influential roster move time that you can make. It always proves that way, and we're about to go into 11 straight weeks of Call of Duty with 2 majors back to back. So for me, the teams that make the moves here and make the moves early to improve the most will have the most success in the long run.
On the flip side, though, sorry to cut you off, Mark. On the flip side, though, Pat, like I do also think that there's something to be said about sticking through adversity with a team. Sometimes you might turn a switch on later in the year. Just because you didn't play that well in the first half doesn't mean you can't play amazing in the second half. I'm just going back to like Infinite Warfare when Team NBS got top 24 at Anaheim, which was insanely terrible. I mean, top 24 was unacceptable. They were the former reigning world champions. Then they went all the way to the World Championship final and lost to the Dynasty. So there's something to be said.
The difference is, Doug, they had winners already. Like,
that is true.
And same thing with LA Thieves, right? Like LA Thieves started Vanguard horrible, but like they had winners. And when you have winners, when you have players are capable, their slump doesn't really matter. But when you look at a squad like Vegas, like their slump can't be a slump. They're just playing at like a below average that they've never shown to be above anyway. So for me, it's tough to make those comparisons because it's like the best teams in the world can absolutely go through slumps. We've seen it time and time again. Players can go through slumps. But the people that you trust are people that have been at a different level prior and usually come back to that level. But for me, I'm just being let down by someone like I don't have confidence in to show me something that I've never seen before.
Well, what about Carolina, Mark? I mean, they got Clayster, they got TJ, right? You got Fellow. He's won before on LAN. He's won in challengers as well. These guys are kind of struggling. They're doing better on LAN, but not good online. But they have proven winners as well, Pat. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on Carolina?
I mean, Carolina, I think, to Pat's point, I do think having proven winners on your team is important, but, proven winners, years ago is also a completely different thing, in my opinion, as well. Like, I do think, obviously, when it comes down to it, you had LAT who started off poorly in their Vanguard season, but their players had won a lot more recently than that. And it's a little different than the Carolina situation, I'd say, so it's kind of hard to compare, but I do think, having those proven like players with success previously is going to give you a lot more faith. Look at NYSL. They got top 12 at the last major. We predicted them to start off well in the next and come back and bounce back. And obviously they did that because we know what that team possesses and what they've shown previously. So I think it's one of those ones where it's just a mixture of different factors, to be honest with you. But yeah,
I will say, and I'm curious on your guys' thoughts on this because I've kind of always thought this. It's happened years past. Bad teams that we agree should make roster changes go to events and then get like a decent performance, and then it stops them from making roster changes. Do you think that's going to be the case here with Carolina, with maybe even Legion? I thought it was with Minnesota last event. Do you think teams are going to have that kind of like thought process to think a little bit farther out than just like, oh, we just played okay? Like,
I'd hope so. I'd like to hope so. Like, you look at some of these teams, they have an opportunity now. They've got a good placement. They have a good opportunity to go to champs. The further you get on down the line, you start having these situations where challengers teams or challengers players turn around and go, nah, I'm not joining because I don't want to ruin my stock type thing. And we've seen that happen in previous seasons. So I think now, if you're wanting to be one of these teams that makes a step forward, if you're one of these guys that just plays 5th and 6th, Carolina, LAG, you have a great opportunity now to jump off of this top 6 and maybe make one roster change, tweak something slightly, and propel yourselves into that more consistent, at least pushing into, those top 4 placements. I don't think it's going to happen every event, don't get me wrong, regardless of what changes they make, because I think the top 4 is the top 4. But I think if you can maybe squeeze in there's going to be an event where one of those top 4 teams underperforms. You give yourself a chance to win a tournament at the end of the day. I think that's the big thing. They're in a good spot now. Let's maybe shake it up a little bit. Look at our big weaknesses, our big gaps, and how do we maintain our strengths as well, because I think these teams clearly have certain strengths, but they need to like keep those, and as well as work on their weaknesses with some small tweaks. That's kind of
I think it's going to be a team by team basis, right? It just depends on how the team feels inside of the camp. Ultimately, you have to just look at the long term picture as well with the short term picture, depending on where you're at in terms of the placing with the points in the league. But if you feel that your team is still getting better, or if you feel that the meta change or the maps changing or the spawns changing will benefit your team, we've seen it throughout Call of Duty history. If one attachment gets allowed or one attachment gets banned, or one gun gets allowed or one gun gets banned, it completely changes how our team will perform. So
Long Barrel Bar, World War II.
That's the first one that came to my mind, Pat.
Yeah.
Exactly the first one that came to my mind. But yeah, I'm just looking at our bullet points list here, and I'm looking at these standings, and the next point that I see is Miami yet to win a map on land, Real incoming. I'm looking at Miami on this spreadsheet, and we're in dead last at 50 points, Boston Breach. I find that hilarious considering that Miami has not even won a map on land. If that's not proof that we need to stop these online matches with the points and the way that they work, I don't know what else is, because if Miami wins one series and Seattle and Carolina don't, they get to go to the World Championship without even winning a single map on land. And I find that incredibly disrespectful.
Map count.
That is incredibly disrespectful to Call of Duty esports when you have a system set up like this where you can simply play online matches and get rewarded for playing well in them.
Especially with the strength of schedule, right? Like they could be playing bad teams. So, like, it'll obviously even out over the season, but like right now, I mean, like, if you look at who they've played, like, they haven't beat any impressive team outside of that one random 3-0 against Optic. And we kind of throw it out because LAG just had the same thing against FaZe. Like, those just happen. But I agree with you, Doug. I mean, I think that's insane. And I kind of want to loop Seattle Surge in with this Miami conversation.
Yes.
They got to blow it up. Both these teams, they suck. Like, listen, if you're a fan of either of these teams, or you're on either of these teams, you guys suck. It is what it is. You desperately need a change. No moves that are being made are going to help you guys. Like this is a core issue that you guys need a major overhaul. Miami, you can't even win a map on land. That's horrible. And didn't they start in winners? Like,
yeah, they started winners both events.
Yeah, like it's pathetic. And then for Seattle, I mean, we've talked about those guys. We have no idea what they're doing. They looked awful. Obviously, we don't know the Illy situation. He's probably not coming back. But even then, like there are hungry, good players and challengers that are better than the players they have on their team now. So I kind of just wanted to loop those in because both those teams like don't even deserve to be talked about until they blow it up and get much better.
I don't know if Seattle would do this because I don't think we've seen anything like this, but like wholesale changes. But the only player I would generally keep on Seattle would be Abuser, personally. I would literally chalk the rest of the other three.
Only if he runs a main AR. Because
yeah, he has to run a main AR. Yeah, of course. He has to be the main AR. And then I would literally rebuild completely. Is that going to happen in reality? Probably not. Like, I mean...
That's what should have happened in the offseason. It should have been Abuser as a main and fill out the rest of the roster.
Yeah, I was mind-blown, to be honest. What are you going to say, Doug?
No, I'm sorry. It's just like, I know what I know when I see what I see. This guy Abuser is a tier 1 player. What are we doing here, man? Dude, if I tell you Abuser should be a main AR, make him a main AR. You're wasting your life away if you don't listen to my word when I say these things. I know what I see when I play people. That's the only reason Boston Academy didn't win on LAN. Abuser. And then in Vanguard, the only reason they win on LAN, Scrappy. I know when I play a generational talented player because I played with and against generational talented players a decade ago. So I know the feeling of what it feels like when I play him in modern day. Making this guy run a sub and then having Arcides and then having Illy and then having him come out and then having Brezzy come in. It seems like a compromise of, okay, Abuser, we believe in you. What do you think? Well, I like Brezzy. I'm comfortable with him. All right, fair enough. Let's bring him in. Well, then you still have Alec and Kyler, and there is absolutely no sort of camaraderie between all these guys. So if I'm in this camp, I am putting my foot down and I am putting people in their place.
Did you hear their listening, Doug? It sounded demoralizing. Like their comms were the worst I've ever heard. It was so bad.
I mean, if you just think about the people, you got Kyler, right? Huke, Arcides, and I can just imagine how their tones are going to get if they feel something in the game that they don't like. Because we all know as a player, the feeling you get when you see reactions based off of how your players play on your team or the routes that they take. I can tell you, Pat, playing with you, you were one of the hardest players to play with. And I didn't want to let you down. And I studied a lot of film every single day of my life because if I heard your voice changing a little bit towards me in a game, the only thing I wanted to hear from you was, good shit, Doug, let's fucking go. Good shit, man. And if I didn't hear that, I wasn't happy. So whatever you have to do to your ego, if you have to strip your ego completely from you, if you have to pour more love into your teammates, if you have to put your foot down and be a little bit more assertive, whatever you need to do to make everything make sense. But maybe these guys just don't understand it, Pat. And I'm not saying about Alec and Kyler. They've obviously won. But maybe we all know this too, Pat. Winning changes you as well. We all know that as well. I mean, no matter what you say, anytime you win, your ego gets inflated. It's just a fact. So you feel like you're better than others. You feel like people aren't on your level. You feel like you deserve more. And that mentality is just never going to get you far in life. Maybe it'll get you far in the short term, and you might get a little bit of, short-term success. But if you really want to be around for the long haul and have a lot of people say a lot of good things about you, you got to make sure that you pour your heart into your team. You got to put the team first at all times, and you got to see the strengths of these people. And I couldn't agree more, man. Like when I'm looking at some of these rosters, and then we even have a bullet point where Boston and LAT underperform. I mean, at least with Boston and Thieves, we see some sort of promise in situations. We see there's hope, right? But some of these teams that are ahead, like Seattle Surge, Miami, Gorillas, right? Even Rocker at times as well, with the way that they'll lose games. It's like, man, there's something with one. It's always like a one person thing. It stems from one person, then it infiltrates everyone else, and you have to figure out what's the reason why this is happening. And I just don't understand why people don't figure that out, Pat.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, like you said, Doug, there's two different situations here. We have Seattle and Miami, who, in my opinion, need to make at least two changes. And then Boston LAT, I do still believe they need to make changes, but I think both of those teams maybe only need to make like one change for now. I mean, obviously they could, probably improve it in multiple areas. But I think realistically, with the talent available, etc., it's probably only one potential roster change. For me, though, Miami, they are going to be difficult, like we've always talked about all season long. They only can pick up Spanish players realistically.
I think Parasite said this. Do you think they give up that Spanish like cheese thing? Like I feel like they have to go outside of that. Like if we're talking about really competing in the CDL, like there's plenty of international teams with mixed players from everywhere. I feel like if they really want to compete, they have to expand their their thought process for only picking up, because they're so limited. They're limited to what, like 6 players, and they have 5 of them.
Yeah. I would look at it like this: Vickle, you're safe. You've won before, albeit it was for scrap, but you have won before. Vickle, what do you think we should do? I'm looking at the resumes of these people. Like, do we not do background checks on people? Look, you can say I'm throwing shade, but like, if you've never won in your life and you've been competing for 5+ years, what are you doing on a pro team? Seriously. I'm just going to be the one to say it because I just feel this way strongly about it. If I played competitive Call of Duty for that long and I've never won before, why do I have a voice? Why do I have an opportunity? It just doesn't make sense to me. This might come off as being a hater again. I'm just trying to spit facts. I just don't understand the logic behind that. And I agree, Pat, you could easily just snap a finger, drop half of this roster or squad wipe it and just keep Vickle. And maybe you're bringing 04. I don't know. Try it. Maybe what's the worst case scenario? The guy just won. Maybe you bring in 04 and have him work with Vickle. Maybe you have a new look. Abizi at World War II champs lost to me, Blast, Dashy, and Ricky. He was teaming with Sender, Diabolic, and Chino. Abizi got top 24.
It's an insane shout. Shout.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I know people are going to think I'm some egomaniac here. I'm just trying to give you guys Call of Duty history in a nutshell so you guys understand how these origins of these people exist. Abizi got top 24 at champs. People thought he was really good going in the offseason for his individual gameplay. They saw potential in him. He's on United the very next year. He's winning champs. You don't know who's coming up from challengers and how they're going to mesh with certain players. It might just be you get a player like 04, maybe get Gunless, like he was struggling in challengers for 2 years, but he's back on the top again, man. We know what Gunless could do when he's playing in the league. Maybe you get 04 and Gunless and you drop Lucky and I don't know, like I don't even know who's on their team at this point. Like you haven't won a map on land. That's pathetic, dude. Like I'm just sorry. Like I just have high standards, dude. I just have high standards. And if you're getting paid a 6-figure salary to be in the pro league and you're not winning a single map, you don't deserve a voice, period. It's not acceptable. There's too much at stake. There's too many moving parts. There's too many people who care too much. I know these owners on Miami Heretics. Graf G is a successful human. He's one of the most entertaining, hardest working content creators. He doesn't want his team to be dead last, not winning a map. You got to think outside of the box. I know you want to have your brand a certain way and you want to have everything Spanish oriented. There has to be a middle ground for everything in life. There has to be a balance. And some of these guys in this league, I'm just questioning. I just don't understand it. And if you hate me for this, I don't care. Like, I just really don't care.
Yeah.
So what do we think on roster changes that we're sure about? Like, obviously Miami and Seattle blow it up. Like, multiple players.
I think, looking at LAT and Boston, I think that if I'm honest, Marcus Afro, he's been the worst performer on their team. So I think if you're looking at a roster change, he's probably the one you'd look at. Boston, I think that AR dynamics is probably a big issue for me. I've said that for a while. So for me, I think you need to change one of those two. I don't know which one it is because I believe they both do have pros and cons. I think it just depends on what players are available, to be honest. And there's obviously a bunch of different challengers talent here, but like you need the right choice. And I think that for me, when I actually think about it more, I think Priesta makes a lot more sense to replace than Slasher personally.
What about someone like Dylan Rex replacing Priesta?
Yeah, I think he's obviously been performing really well. He's a player that, at least in challengers, has shown that he can be a kind of main Slayer type flex. And he's had a bunch of pop-off moments. I think he's good on multiple different game modes. And he's been slowly chipping away at challengers for a while now, so he might not be a bad shout at all. Especially in this game, he's been performing very well, so I don't think that's a bad shout whatsoever.
I think the problem is there's a lot of teams that could use him and may go after him, right? Like, because we're talking about the Rocker. I feel like they could pick up Dylan Rex. Like, he's a good AR to replace what they need. And they're kind of another team that I think should make a change. I think it's clear at this point, Awakening is like you said, the same with Afro. Like they're clear underperformer, their most inconsistent player. I saw a crazy stat too. Like he's only went positive 15% of the series he's played in MW3, which is insane. Compared to like MW2, it was like 80% or something like that. Like that's a ridiculous difference from year to year. I agree with you on Afro and Thieves. I think that's it's got to be a for sure. The weird thing about that is like Afro's one of their better S&D players, but he's so bad in respawn.
Yeah.
Like could you see a world where they're like, all right, fuck it, you're only dropped for respawns and we're going to keep you for S&Ds and just sub you in and out? Because he's legit one of their better S&D players. Like he's consistently performing in search, but
now we're
talking.
Now we're talking, Pat. This is what we're getting outside the box, because I also, just to counter your point, Pat, it's all about team dynamic, and we know this, especially in the new CODs. It's not like the old days where your stats are your stats. I feel like your stats are heavily skewed based off of how your players and your team are moving on the map. So if he's consistently putting up those stats, I would argue that it has to be something with the team flow and the dynamic, because I know Marcus can shoot. That's not a question to me.
Straight.
That boy knows how to move on the map.
He has the sprints, though. That's what I noticed. He sprints way too much.
Well, you're right. You're right. And I think a lot of it has to fall on him, and he has to take his accountability. But I would love to see teams be a little bit more outside the box with that mindset, Pat, because you have certain players like maybe Purge, although he did sell the round 11 on Invasion. He's a fantastic play caller in Search and Destroy, and he always puts up really good clutch plays. But maybe you want to bring in someone else in respawn, or maybe you want to take Nero out in the Search and Destroy because he's going to run forward and die, but you want Nero to be in on that respawn because you know he's going to eat people alive. I would love to see teams think a little bit more outside the box with that mindset. I agree.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to move on to community questions now, guys. So we have, just want to say first and foremost, another great round of questions from you guys. Keep them coming in the comments below. There's night and day from the first week of matches. I'm going to keep saying that because generally you guys are hitting with some good ones. So we're going to go right off the rip here and go with the first question. So Parth Patel says, question for the next reverse sweep, and Doug asked me to ask these for the reverse sweep in the stream. For Pat, Doug
we got a Doug question cheese?
Yeah, there's Doug question cheese here.
That's not the way this went down, but okay, let's go with it.
It's all good.
Okay, yeah, let's go
for
with
Pat, Doug believes if his SB team and Ghosts didn't go to the Optic LAN before Champs, SB would have beat them and your call team at Champs. What are your thoughts on that? Will you disagree? Why is Doug wrong?
I think they would have beat Optic for sure. But I don't think they would have beat us. I will say that if they didn't go to that LAN, I think they would have been in finals. That I think is pretty evident, and a lot of players thought that back in the day. I mean, we also had a pre-LAN. It was a little different. It was like a 4-team LAN. TK was there. Justice, I think, was there, and one more team I can't remember. But yeah, the problem with Doug's that pre-LAN that SB team went to was like, it was clear that SB was just on a different level than that Optic team, and they basically played nonstop for how many ever days, and just made that Optic team so much better. And that's how it worked back in the day. Like when you scrimmed, when you had high IQ players on bad teams playing against a team that was better than them, they would learn so much from that matchup, and that's what they did. And SB basically taught Optic a lot of how to play COD Ghost before Champs, and improved that team massively. So I think if that didn't happen, I think you would have seen drastically different placements from those two teams at the actual event. But the truth is, I don't think any team in the world would have beat my Complexity team on that weekend. But I do think SB would have been much better.
You realize who you're talking to, Pat. I literally barely gave you guys a single map like a few weeks before that, and I was yawning the whole time. And you think that I'm going to go into
no money?
But we know why we weren't playing for money. We know why we weren't playing for money. We don't have to say it here. We know why that happened. Yeah, you really think that when there's money on the line and I'm going to play against you, of all people,
$100,000's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is, and I needed that $100,000.
So I wasn't going to school.
Yeah. I don't care. My team needed it too. Dito, Apathy, Saints. Dito and Saints were living in the same house. They hated each other. I had to go fly out there, micromanage their lives for 2 weeks straight. You think I'm going to lose to you? You in a world championship final?
I will say there's a part 2 to this question, and was SB team a worry for y'all? Not really. We thought we were much better than them at search, but we did acknowledge that they were a good respawn team. Specifically Blitz, they played very well. And depending on the map, they were pretty good at Dom. But I did have the number 1 Dom KD at that tournament. I think it was like a 1.6 in Dom. So
would have been a 2 point nothing and an L.
A 2 point nothing. That doesn't even make sense. Bottom line, no to your question, Parth. Do I think SB would have beat my team?
I just want to touch on this as well. I played.
Yeah, Mark. What's your opinion? Who do you think would have won? If
I played Pat at that champs in winners round 1, and I remember, we're down to map 3 Blitz Warhawk. I'm like, boys, don't worry, we're gonna reverse sweep them. Yeah, obviously talking. I'm trying to gas up the boys a little bit. Map 3 starts, insta 4 dead. We're getting smoked. I was like, oh, bro, it's absolutely shot.
Instantly.
Literally, I can remember my play off the rip. I ran onto the mid-red car, heady on Warhawk, looked down mid-street. Crim just jumped out, ripped me off the heady, and I was like, that's it. Shocked.
So just to remind you, Pat, Mark, that's hilarious. Just to remind you, Pat, not only did we bully you down a few weeks before champs, we 3-0'd you to
crazy word.
We played you to qualify for the championship because you're saying no money, but we played you to qualify. I'm pretty sure
we both already qualified when we played.
No, we played to qualify.
No,
it was the winners round 2.
The finals?
No, well before that.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, you obviously beat us in the winner bracket, but we knew we weren't not going to qualify.
Yeah, but you had to beat us to qualify, and you lost 3-0, and then in the finals you were down 5-0, and we gave you 2 petty maps, and then I'm pretty sure at champs we taught Optic how to play. Everyone knows that. I'm pretty sure that at the end of that season, didn't we play you at Gfinity and we 3-0'd you again? And then didn't Karma Skype me on the side saying, I don't want to be on this team anymore. I'm tired of playing with Pat. Doug, I want to play with you now. And then what happened? We picked up Karma, and then didn't we win again? And then your team got top 16. I'm pretty sure
that was already after our roster broke up, though. And then guess who won the last event and got the last laugh? I did, Doug, at ESWC. Mark, you were there, weren't that ESWC a Ghost that year?
Yeah, I played you in the final. I played you in a few finals, but I've never won a single one.
It's all good. You were there, Mark, and that's what
I was there, man. I was. Yeah, the French fans were going crazy. There was Just Dance on.
Dude, I will say, because this probably will never have a. Well, I don't say never, but it's likely we won't have another French event again. The event. The ESWC events that we had in France were always insane. They were crowd wise. I know everyone gasses up like the UK crowd, and I will admit the UK crowd definitely better than NA crowd. But the French know how to have a crowd, bro. Their events were bar none the craziest crowd of any event I've ever competed in.
Yeah, they have passionate fans, like especially for when like Gataga and all them were playing. Like they were going crazy for them guys, like every single time.
Yeah,
I even at one of the SWC events played for Vitality, and even though it was an all English team, we had Neo, who was like the kind of owner of Vitality or whatever at that point. He was like standing behind us when we were playing, and the whole crowd was on our side, and it was insane. So yeah, like the French fans are definitely up there, 100%. But we've got one more question here. We've got E4 Tricks with who was considered the superstar on the Optic Dynasty and the Complexity Dynasty.
That's a great question.
For me. I'll answer it first because you guys have definitely a lot more sort of thought-provoking here. For me, I think in Complexity, at least this is how it felt when I was playing. Teep, right? I'm telling you, right? Listen, Teep fried me every time we played. I don't know what it was. Going into the match, every single time, I was thinking Teep was going to be the one that was going to perform the worst. And for whatever reason, every time I played you guys, Teep was the one that was fried.
Teep was the European Reaper.
He was 100%. He was 100%.
Anytime we played a European team, Teep fried. I don't know if it was just a playstyle thing or what.
I don't know.
He was a Reaper of the European teams.
Yeah, 100%. And then on the Optic Dynasty, I'd say at least when I'm playing against them, who it felt like, I'd say it was Formal for me, who felt like the most like. I don't know. That's how I felt the most. But that maybe being an AR player and like fighting against them more, etc. But for me, it felt like Formal was like the hardest gunfight. But yeah, maybe that's not the right way of looking at it. But that's my answer anyway.
No, that's fair, Mark. I think it's all subjective on your play style, and I think that's absolutely fair. For me, I always felt that the two guys that always stood out to me on my come up in Black Ops 1 was you, Pat, and Scump, especially when you guys team together. And then when you had like an objective minded player like Mr. Bobby playing with you in the beginning of the Black Ops 1 season, I truly thought you guys missed up. If you didn't drop Mr. Bobby, I think you would have been a much harder team to beat at the championship that year. When you had Fears, I felt like it screwed up your pacing a little bit, but I felt like you and Crim would be a yin and yang, neck and neck as a superstar, especially because you both wanted to prove each other how good you were. So you both had the insane ice, the insane slaying ability, the confidence. I would give it to you. I feel like you kind of put Crim on. I don't think Crim's career could have been the same if you didn't put him on. So I felt like when you were in your absolute form, you were the superstar. And then on the Optic Dynasty, it's the same conversation. Formal team hopped his way all the way to the top. He did it very fast. But to me, Seth was always the truth. I mean, if you played with Seth, if you played against Seth in those big moments at all, you would just know that his pacing on the map was extremely consistently perfect. It was almost flawless, bar none. So I would say that it was Seth consistently as a superstar on the Optic Dynasty, and they all are superstars, and same with your roster too, Pat. But I think the absolute peaks, although Formal had that IW Champs run, I just like to look at the origins and how these players got there. And I always felt like you and Seth were two of the first players that monumentally changed all of Call of Duty esports.
My answer would be for my goal team. I think it was me and Crim in both iterations in BO2 and Ghost. And I think in the Jetpack Optic team, I think it was Scump and Formal. I don't think you can have dynasty teams without multiple superstars. I think that's even apparent when we look at the Atlanta FaZe roster today. Even going back to the EU United stuff, like you need multiple people to perform at that level consistently to win, many events over that stretch. I think Atlanta FaZe is doing it now, obviously with Simp and Abizi and Celium. Like they, regardless of who they pick up, like that's a solid core. And it's the same thing with my Complexity and even the Optic team. Like when you have multiple people who are playing that level, that's when you become a dynasty. And so, yeah, I think it's multiple. I don't think there's any given one on any day.
Good answers. And that's it from us, guys. Here at Reverse Sweep, presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code Reverse Sweep for a first deposit match of up to $100. We hope you enjoyed the Call of Duty this weekend, and we hope you enjoyed the show. As always, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below your questions for the next episode. We'll see you later.